Everyone heard the Duke's words, but it was Lady Evelyn Harrow who felt them slice through her chest. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, half hidden by tall palms, when laughter rippled across the marble floor. It was not loud laughter. It was the polite, cruel kind that lived behind silk fans and careful smiles, the kind meant to wound without leaving proof. "I dance with ladies who improve my standing," the Duke said calmly, "not charity cases designed to fade into the wallpaper." For a moment, the room seemed to stop breathing. Lady Evelyn did not cry. She did not gasp. She did not flee. She simply stood there, holding her fan too tightly, as if her dignity were the last fragile thing she owned. London, 1863, had decided her worth in a single sentence. The ballroom glowed with gaslight and gold. Chandeliers shimmered above polished floors. Music floated through the air, sweet and practiced. Women in rich gowns moved like living jewels, their laughter sharp and confident. Men in tailored coats surveyed the room as if choosing prizes. Lady Evelyn was none of those things. At 22, she was already known as forgettable. Her dress was lilac but faded, 2 seasons old. Her figure was slim but unremarkable. Her light brown hair was neatly braided without ornament, and the pearls at her throat had belonged to her mother, long gone. They were the only fine things she owned. She had learned to take up as little space as possible. Her stepmother, Lady Beatrice Harrow, stood across the room in deep red silk, glowing with triumph. Beatrice collected social victories the way other women collected jewels. Evelyn was not invited tonight out of kindness. She was here as contrast, as proof of how well Beatrice had done with herself. Poor, plain Evelyn. The words followed her everywhere. Evelyn's gray-blue eyes drifted back to the man who had spoken. The Duke of Blackwell stood near the grand staircase, tall and dark, his presence commanding without effort. His coat fit him perfectly. His expression was cool, certain, untouched by doubt. He had not meant to destroy her. That was the worst part. To him, she was not worth remembering. Lord Henry Vale, standing beside the Duke, laughed lightly and said something about kindness, about offering a dance. The Duke had responded without hesitation, his voice carrying just far enough. Then his eyes met Evelyn's. For 2 seconds they held, long enough for hope to make its terrible mistake. Evelyn felt something crack inside her. Not break. Crack. She placed her untouched glass of champagne on a nearby table and turned toward the terrace doors. She walked, slow and steady, her spine straight. She refused to give them tears. The crowd parted for her with polite indifference, whispers following like shadows. Outside, the night air was sharp and clean. The sounds of the ballroom faded into distant music. The city stretched beneath the stars, uncaring and vast. Evelyn gripped the cold stone railing and let one tear fall before wiping it away. "I will not break," she whispered. She did not return to the ballroom. The next morning, sunlight filled the breakfast room of Harrow House, but Evelyn felt none of its warmth. She sat at the long table, tea untouched, her mind replaying the Duke's words with cruel clarity, designed to fade into the wallpaper. Lady Beatrice entered with decisive steps. Her presence announced before her voice. "Good," she said sharply. "You're awake. We need to speak." Evelyn set down her cup. "I've made arrangements," Beatrice continued, settling into her chair. "You'll be leaving London. Thornfield Cottage in Cornwall will suit you. Quiet, remote, indefinite." Evelyn stared at her. "Cornwall?" she asked softly.
"The old house on the cliffs?"
"Exactly," Beatrice said, pleased. "The air will do you good. After last night's embarrassment, it's clear society is not your strength." The meaning was unmistakable. "You're sending me away," Evelyn said.
"Don't be dramatic," Beatrice replied smoothly.
"I'm protecting the family's reputation. You'll leave in 3 days." Evelyn understood then that this had been planned. The ball had simply provided the excuse. She did not beg. She did not argue. There were no good options. 3 days later, she left London in a carriage carrying little more than books, simple clothes, and her mother's pearls. No one came to see her off. The journey took days. Smoke-dark streets gave way to open land. Fields replaced buildings. The air changed. When the sea finally appeared, wild and endless, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. Thornfield Cottage stood alone on the cliffs, stone walls weathered by wind and time. It was not a cottage at all, but a small manor long neglected. The garden had surrendered to thorns and wild roses. Waves crashed below with a force that felt almost violent. Mrs. Wren, a stern woman with kind eyes, greeted her. "You'll be wanting warmth," she said. "Come inside." The house was cold but clean, sparse but honest. That first night, Evelyn lay awake listening to the sea roar against the cliffs. It was nothing like London. It was raw, relentless, and strangely comforting. No one was watching her here. Weeks passed slowly. Evelyn explored the house, the cliffs, the nearby village. She wrote letters that went unanswered. She learned the rhythm of isolation. Then, one morning, she discovered a small locked room upstairs. Inside was a hidden library filled with books she had never been permitted to read in London. Philosophy, science, essays written by women who questioned everything. Evelyn read until her hands shook. Ideas filled the silence where shame had once lived. She began walking to the village regularly. One rainy afternoon, she met the vicar's wife, Mrs. Alcott, who mentioned local girls eager to learn to read. "Would you consider helping?" Mrs. Alcott asked gently. Evelyn hesitated. Then she said yes. Teaching began with 6 girls and a chalkboard. It grew slowly, quietly. Letters became words. Words became confidence. Confidence became transformation. Evelyn found herself laughing again. Months passed. Winter storms battered the cliffs. Evelyn stood at her window one night, watching the sea rage, and realized something profound. She was alone, truly alone, and free. No one here called her plain. No one measured her worth by gowns or glances. Her value came from what she gave, not what she looked like. She stopped waiting to be chosen. She chose herself. In London, the Duke of Blackwell attended balls and clubs as always. He told himself he had forgotten the Harrow girl, but sometimes, late at night, he saw gray-blue eyes in his dreams, calm, steady, walking away without looking back. And somewhere on a wild cliff in Cornwall, a woman once dismissed as invisible was becoming someone unforgettable. 5 years changed Thornfield Cottage into a place that breathed with purpose. The wild roses no longer strangled the path. Vegetables grew in neat rows. Smoke rose daily from the chimney, even in spring, because the house was rarely quiet anymore. Women and girls arrived each morning carrying books and slates, their voices filling the rooms with questions and laughter. Lady Evelyn Harrow was 27 now. She looked much the same to a careless eye. The same light brown hair, the same gray-blue eyes, the same face that London had once dismissed as unremarkable. But nothing about her presence was small anymore. She moved with calm confidence, her voice steady, her gaze unafraid. She had stopped trying to disappear. What began as simple lessons in reading had become a school. Women of all ages came. Fishermen's daughters, widows, wives who had never held a pen before. They learned letters, numbers, history, and how to speak without apology. Evelyn taught them what she had learned herself, that worth did not need permission. One morning, Mrs. Alcott arrived breathless with a folded newspaper. "They wrote about you," she said, eyes bright. "About the school." Evelyn read the article slowly. Her name printed in ink felt unreal. Praise followed each sentence. Innovation, dedication, change. She folded the paper carefully. "It's not about me," she said. "It's about them." But that was not entirely true. That afternoon, another letter arrived. This one bore a London seal. Her father was dead. The news landed softly, like something long expected. There were no tears, only a strange emptiness. He had never defended her, never written back, never stopped her banishment. Now he never would. The letter requested her presence at the memorial. London was calling her back. Evelyn stood alone that evening on the cliff, the wind pulling loose strands of her hair. The sea roared below, the same as it had the day she arrived, broken and forgotten. "I am not the girl who left," she said quietly. She decided to go, London greeted her with smoke and noise and memory. Carriages crowded the streets, shops glittered, people hurried past without looking. The city felt smaller than she remembered, tighter, like a place that had stopped growing. Harrow House stood exactly the same, cold, polished, unwelcoming. Lady Beatrice met her with thin smiles and sharp glances. "You've changed," she said. "Cornwall has made you bold." Evelyn smiled calmly. "It made me honest." The memorial filled the church with familiar faces. People who once laughed now whispered. People who ignored her now stared. Evelyn stood before them all and spoke. She spoke of absence, of silence, of learning to define oneself when no one else will. The room held its breath, and at the back of the church the Duke of Blackwell listened as if every word were meant for him. He had aged. Lines touched his eyes. His confidence no longer looked effortless. When he looked at Evelyn, something like fear crossed his face. They met again days later in a quiet bookshop. No insults, no apologies, just silence thick with history. "I was wrong," he said finally, his voice low. Evelyn looked at him without anger. "I know," she replied. He offered no defense, no charm, only truth. "I watched you leave," he said, "and I have regretted it every day since." She did not comfort him. She did not forgive him. She simply nodded. "I built a life without you," she said. Do not mistake that for bitterness. The Duke did not stop her when she turned away, but he began to act, publicly. He funded her school openly, spoke in support of women's education, challenged the same society that once applauded his cruelty. People whispered again, this time with confusion. Lady Beatrice's control slipped, old secrets surfaced, accusations spread. Her social standing cracked beneath her. Evelyn watched it all without satisfaction. She had not come to London for revenge. She had come to stand as herself. At an art gallery weeks later, her paintings lined the walls, portraits of women London never noticed, strength painted in ordinary faces. At the center hung one portrait above all others, a young woman in faded lilac, half hidden, eyes steady, hurt but unbroken. The title read simply, "The girl they called plain the Duke," stood before it longer than anyone else. When Evelyn joined him, he did not speak. He did not need to. "I painted her kindly," Evelyn said softly, "because no one else did." "I see her now," he replied. "I should have then." She looked at him for a long moment. "You were not ready," she said. "Neither was I." A man from France approached that night. An art patron, a believer. He spoke of schools across borders, of partnership, of respect freely given. He offered Evelyn a future without wounds. The Duke watched from a distance, understanding settling heavily in his chest. Evelyn stood between past and possibility. She did not choose yet, because Part 3 would require a reckoning, and not everyone would survive it unchanged. London gathered like a storm the night Evelyn's exhibition opened. Carriages lined the street outside the gallery, their lamps glowing against the dark. Voices spilled into the night, eager and sharp. Society had come not only for art, but for spectacle. They wanted to see the woman who had been sent away and dared to return changed. Evelyn stood inside, calm on the surface, her hands cool but steady. She wore a deep blue gown, simple and elegant, chosen not to impress, but to belong to herself. The walls around her held the story of her life in brushstrokes. Women she had taught, women she had learned from, women who had been unseen, and one painting that held her past. People stopped before it in silence. Some recognized her, some did not. The Duke of Blackwell arrived quietly without announcement. He did not seek attention. He stood near the back, watching Evelyn greet guests with a confidence that once would have terrified her. She did not look for him. That was what unsettled him most. A critic spoke first, then another. Words, like powerful and necessary, drifted through the room. Heads nodded. Opinions shifted. London, slow and stubborn, began to reconsider. Then the French patron stepped forward and spoke of expansion, of schools, of change that crossed borders. His admiration for Evelyn was open and unashamed. Whispers turned sharp. The Duke felt something twist inside him, but he stayed where he was. When Evelyn finally addressed the room, her voice was steady. "These women were never invisible," she said. "We simply chose not to see them." Silence followed. Then, applause. Not polite applause. Real applause. Later, when the room thinned and the night softened, the Duke approached her. "Lady Evelyn," he said quietly. They turned. "Your Grace." No warmth, no coldness, just truth. "I owe you more than apologies," he said.
"I know that."
"Yes," she replied. He did not argue. "I will spend the rest of my life proving I am not the man I was," he continued. "Not for you, for myself." Evelyn studied him. The arrogance was gone. In its place was humility, hard-earned and incomplete. "That is your work," she said. "Not mine." He nodded. She left London 2 days later. Cornwall welcomed her home with wind and waves and the smell of earth. Thornfield felt smaller than it once had, but warmer, alive. The school greeted her with excitement. The girls crowded around her, eager for stories. Mrs. Wren pressed her hands gently. "You were missed," she said. "I was never lost," Evelyn replied. Weeks passed. Letters arrived from France, respectful and patient. Offers without pressure. Futures without ghosts. And then the Duke came to Cornwall. Not in splendor, not with declarations. He came with books, with tools, with sleeves rolled up. He taught numbers. He listened. He learned. The village watched cautiously. Evelyn watched carefully. He returned again and again. Seasons changed. Trust grew slowly, like something fragile that needed care. One evening, standing on the cliff where she once swore she would not break, Evelyn turned to him. "I do not need to be chosen," she said. "I know," he replied. "I am asking to walk beside you, if you allow it." She considered the sea, endless and honest. "Yes," she said finally. On equal ground, they married quietly the following spring. No ballroom, no spectacle, only people who mattered. Years later, when someone asked Evelyn if she ever regretted being sent away, she smiled. "No," she said. "That was the moment my life truly began." And London never forgot the woman it once tried to erase.